Our sensory information is mostly like coming from periphery all the way to the central nervous system. But the central nervous system can also have some descending pathway that can affect our ability to sense sensory information. That means we actually not only using ascending pathway to send sensory information, our central nervous system can also send descending pathways to influence the sensory information, like inhibition. We will see that when we talk about the pain sensation transmission. When we talk about the neuronal information transport, we already talked about divergent and convergent. Divergence, it means one sensory information goes up, they can synapse on many interneurons, and then that means we diverge the information. And on the other hand, more than one sensory information can synapse on the same interneuron. That means we can converge the information onto one. So by this divergence and convergence, and the sensory information can have a lot of different levels of processing of the sensory information. So that's the general organization of the sensory system. All the sensory information will reach our cortex, and especially we call the sensory cortex. Then we know there's a stimulus. Otherwise, if you block the sensory transmission either from the peripheral end or at the spinal side, if you block that, the sensory information cannot send to the sensory cortex, then we will not know there is a sensation. Probably you know that people with a spinal cord injury, they have no sense on their feet, their legs, or even, or depends the injury level on their spinal cord. So that's very important. Where is our primary sensory areas? If you remember, we have the frontal lobe, we have the parietal lobe, we have two temporal lobes, and then we have occipital lobe. Well, our sensory can be at very different places. We have left and right hemisphere. In the middle, there's a connection called corpus callosum, but we look either left or right hemisphere. Between the frontal and the parietal, there's the central sulcus. The somatic sensory cortex is on the parietal lobe at the back of the central sulcus. That's somatosensory cortex. And the auditory cortex is located at the temporal lobe. And the occipital lobe is very important. That's our visual cortex are located. Other than that, we have a lot of so-called association area, association cortex, and that will further integrate the sensory information into what we know as senses and as perception. The ascending sensory neuron pathways can have two major kinds of organization. One is called the specific ascending pathway. That means the sense from the receptor neuron all the way to the central nervous system in the spinal cord and all the way to the central nervous system. They all have synapse, but they will not mix with other senses. They are quite specific. If it's a touch sensation, then it goes all the way to our sensory cortex and we perceive as touch. And temperature and also pain, so forth. They also have another less specific, we call it non-specific ascending sensory pathways. That means some of the senses will converge into one upper sensory neurons. So that means that upper sensory neurons can be stimulated by both touch and the temperature. So that means they are not that specific. They only give you a crude sense. Okay. Specific pathway, they just carry information about a single type of stimuli. And the non-specific ascending pathway can carry different types of information. To lead to so-called perception, we know what's happening. Not just sense something, we know what's happening. They have three processes. The first one is they transduce different kind of energy, mechanical, photo, or chemical stimulus into receptor potential, action potential. Actually, we have to have action potential, okay? And then we transmit that action potential, the frequency, that coding through the nervous system. That's the second step. The third step is interpreting the data, and that leads to what kind of stimulus that is, and also the importance of the stimulus. So that's called perception.